In June 1975, a report to the President by the Commission on CIA Activities within the United States was released. It was dubbed the Rockefeller Report because Vice President Nelson A. Rockefeller was the chairman of the commission in Congress. The document begins with a letter addressed to President Ford. It says, "Your commission to investigate CIA activities within the United States, having completed its assignment in accordance with Executive Order Number 11828 of January 4, 1975, herewith submits its final report." It was signed by the members of the commission, Nelson Rockefeller, John Connor, C. Douglas Dillon, Erwin Griswold, Lane Kirkland, Lyman Lemnitzer, Ronald Reagan, and Edgar Shannon. The report is 294 pages in length. The following topics are addressed: summary of the investigation, the CIA's role and authority, supervision and control of the CIA, significant areas of investigation, and an appendix. The preface sets forth the following as the purpose of the document. President Gerald E. Ford created the Commission on CIA Activities within the United States on January 4, 1975. He directed the commission to determine whether any domestic CIA activities exceeded the agency's statutory authority and to make appropriate recommendations. The preface also states that charges that the CIA has conducted illegal activities within the United States, violating the rights of private citizens, have aroused concern because of the number and seriousness of alleged violations of law, and because many of the agency's activities are necessarily secret and therefore are not well understood by the American people. At the same time, many persons have voiced alarm that public controversy and exposure would seriously impair the CIA's ability to function, which in turn could seriously undermine the national security. Therefore, the President took steps designed to ensure that the charges would be fully and impartially investigated and that necessary corrective actions would be taken. Chapter 1 of the Rockefeller Report outlines the fundamental issues involved in the investigation. 1. Individual rights. The Bill of Rights in the Constitution protects individual liberties against encroachment by government. Many statutes and the common law also reflect this protection. The First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment are cited, and it is noted that Americans are protected by the United States Constitution. The principles set by these amendments guarantee the people a high degree of individual privacy. It goes on to say that, in recognition of this right, President Truman and the Congress, in enacting the law creating the CIA in 1947, included a clause providing that the CIA should have no police, subpoena, law enforcement powers, or internal security functions. 2. The government must obey the law. The individual liberties of American citizens depend on government observance of law. Whenever the activities of a government agency exceed its authority, individual liberty may be impaired. National security. This section sets out the idea that the rights of citizens must be balanced with a need for government to provide for national security. Next, resolving the issues. The vigorous pursuit of intelligence by certain methods can lead to invasions of individual rights. The preservation of the United States requires an effective intelligence capability, but the preservation of individual liberties within the United States requires limitations or restrictions on gathering of intelligence. The drawing of reasonable lines where legitimate intelligence needs end and erosion of constitutional government begins is difficult. As a caveat, I need to mention that this report was issued in the 1970s. When I read the part about how the rights of Americans are protected by the First and the Fourth Amendments, I admit I had to chuckle a bit. Why? Because a lot has changed since 1975, especially since the passage of the Patriot Act in 2001. And I won't get into that here, but suffice it to say that the right to free speech and privacy are no longer completely protected by the First and the Fourth Amendments. The Rockefeller Report acknowledges that drug studies were part of a much larger CIA program to study means to control human behavior, including exploration of the effects of radiation, electric shock, psychology, psychiatry, sociology, and harassment substances. However, the press chose to concentrate on the role of the CIA in studying the potential behavior influencing drugs such as LSD and how these might be used in intelligence activities. After the report was issued, however, John D. Marks, author and former staff assistant to the State Department Intelligence Director, filed a Freedom of Information Act appeal on behalf of the Center for National Security Studies. The author of this book, Operation Mind Control, Walter Bowart, filed an identical request. Both Bowart and Marks requested the CIA provide documentation of evidence provided in the Rockefeller Report on the use of mind control tactics by the CIA. Both men subsequently received more than 2,000 pages of top-secret and eyes-only documents, which they were told were what the Rockefeller Commission used to compile its report. However, portions of documents and even entire documents were exempted from release, and the justification given was that the release of such documents would threaten national security pursuant to the National Security Act of 1947. However, Bowart reports that in the photocopied pages he received was a statement to the effect that within a few hours of his resignation, CIA Director Richard Helms had ordered the records shredded and burned. This, of course, was in the wake of Watergate exposures and the Church Committee hearings, which will be the subject of another video. Any documents that remained that the CIA approved for disclosure were highly redacted and contained very few names or organizations. They were generally bereft of the details of the mind control experiments carried out on American citizens. They offered a very superficial review of the CIA's involvement in mind control research. According to surviving documents, the CIA mind control program was run under 4 different project names. One document stated, in 1949, the Office of Scientific Intelligence, or OSI, undertook the analysis of foreign work on certain unconventional warfare techniques, including behavioral drugs, with an initial objective of developing a capability to resist or offset the effect of such drugs. Preliminary phases included the review of drug-related work at institutions such as Mount Sinai Hospital, Boston Psychopathic Hospital, University of Minnesota, Valley Forge General Hospital, Detroit Psychopathic Clinic, Mayo Clinic, and the National Institute of Health. What the document is describing was originally called Project Bluebird and subsequently renamed Project Artichoke. The main emphasis of Artichoke was the use of drugs such as sodium pentothal in connection with interrogation techniques and with the polygraph. In Chapter 7 of Bowart's book, called the MK ULTRANS, he relates several key instances of how such techniques were carried out. One CIA memo dated July 14, 1952, concerned the interrogations of 2 Russian agents who were suspected of being double agents. The memo indicates that these men were admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The subjects were regressed using hypnosis and made to relive past experiences, and then given post-hypnotic suggestions to experience amnesia for the event. Here is what the CIA memo said about how this was accomplished. In each case, a psychiatric medical cover was used to bring the artichoke techniques into action. In the first case, light dosages of drugs coupled with hypnosis were used to induce a complete hypnotic trance. This trance was held for approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes of interrogation, with a subsequent total amnesia produced by post-hypnotic suggestion. In the second case, an individual of much higher intelligence than the first, a deep hypnotic trance was reached after light medication. This was followed by an interrogation lasting for well over an hour. However, a partial amnesia only was obtained at this time, although a total amnesia was obtained for a major part of the test. Since further interrogation was desired, a second test was made on this individual in which the artichoke technique of using a straight medication was employed. On this test, highly successful results were obtained in that a full interrogation lasting 2 hours and 15 minutes was produced, part of which included a remarkable regression. During this regression, the subject actually relived certain past activities of his life, some dating back 15 years, while, in addition, the subject totally accepted Mr. Deleted, the case officer interpreter at the time, as an old trusted friend and beloved personal friend whom the subject had known in past years in Georgia, USSR. Total amnesia was apparently achieved for the entire second case on this test on this case. The drugs used to induce hypnotic trance in this case were sodium pentothal and the stimulant disoxin. In a document dated July 30th, 1956, under the heading Schizophrenic Agent, it was stated that bulbocapnine, an alkaloid, could cause catatonia or stupor from its effects on the central nervous system and cerebral cortex. We desire to have certain psychochemical properties tested on man using the bulbocapnine, which we were fortunate to obtain from Deleted, a sample being enclosed herewith. More bulbocapnine is available if needed. The document also included a request that subjects be tested for loss of speech, loss of sensitivity to pain, loss of memory, and loss of willpower. A memo dated from 1956 authorized psychiatrists in universities and state penitentiaries, names were deleted, to test these drugs on unwitting subjects. An earlier memo stated it was essential to find an area where large numbers of bodies would be used for research and experimentation. Dr. name deleted, stated that in connection with the testing of drugs, he was quite certain a number of psychiatrists all over the United States would be willing to test new drugs, especially drugs that affect the mind. Project Artichoke eventually evolved into Project MK Ultra, which was approved by CIA Director Allen Dulles on April 3, 1953. MK Ultra was the code name for the research and development period of mind control, while a sub-project called MK Delta was the code name for the operational phase, during which the techniques of mind control were actually applied to unwitting subjects. MK Delta involved procedures for use of biochemicals in clandestine operations, and according to Walter Bowart, besides drugs, MK Delta and MK Ultra experimented with radiation, electroshock, psychology, psychiatry, sociology, anthropology, harassment substances, and what were called paramilitary devices and materials. Through the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs and federal institutions such as prisons, drugs could be administered to unwitting subjects. Over 139 different drugs, including various amnesia potions, were used. By the mid to late 1960s, many lawsuits had been filed on behalf of the human guinea pigs who were experimented on in prisons and in mental institutions. In 1971, the Senate Subcommittee on Constitutional Rights began an investigation due to the huge number of lawsuits. The Senate Committee on the Judiciary, 3 years later, released a report called Individual Rights and the Federal Role in Behavior Modification. It was mostly ignored by the press, even though it contained some damning information on CIA behavior modification projects that were being run by the Defense Department, the Department of Labor, the National Science Foundation, the Veterans Administration, and the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare through its sub-agency, the National Institute of Mental Health. In a document dated February 10, 1951, entitled Defense Against Soviet Mental Interrogation and Espionage Techniques, it was stated that international treaties or other agreements have never controlled the experimental development and actual use of unconventional methods of warfare, such as devices for subversive activities, fiendish acts of espionage, torture, and murder of prisoners of war, and physical duress and other unethical persuasive actions in the interrogation of prisoners. The document also detailed how mind-influencing drugs needed to be tested in normal life settings, as well as in institutions such as mental hospitals and prisons. So the CIA financed and established so-called safe houses in which federal narcotics agents would give drugs to unwitting subjects and then record their reaction. No CIA agents were actually present when this was done, however. One casualty of this program of administering drugs to unwitting subjects was Dr. Frank Olson, an employee of the Department of the Army. Olson was given LSD without his knowledge. He died when he fell, jumped, or otherwise exited, pushed maybe, from a 12th floor hotel window in New York while under the influence of the drug. The cause of Olson's death was concealed for 22 years, and his family was told he had committed suicide after having a mental breakdown. They were never given a true explanation of what happened. 5 days after the Rockefeller Report was released and the public outrage over it began, the Olson children were informed by the DIA that it was their father that was cited as an employee of the Department of the Army that was given LSD without his knowledge while he was attending a meeting with CIA personnel working on the drug project. Even though the Olson children were stunned and angry about having been lied to for 22 years, they discovered when they tried to sue the government that an individual damaged while in government employ cannot sue the government. They asked the Senate to vote them a special bill of recompense for the death of the head of the household, and after passing both the Senate and House of Representatives, the Olson family was allotted $750,000. A pittance compared to what they might have received as a result of a civil court case. Eventually, the Army had to announce that since 1956 it had tested LSD on nearly 1,500 unwitting servicemen and on several thousand more volunteers, a total of 6,940 in all. The Department of Health, Education, and Welfare revealed that it had administered LSD to about 2,500 prisoners, mental patients, and paid volunteers between 1954 and 1968. It also said it had granted $7.5 million to more than 30 university researchers who independently ran LSD tests on human subjects. In conclusion, Bowart says that from the first days of Project Bluebird, and throughout all the other CIA and mind control projects, the goal was to find answers to the following questions. Can accurate information be obtained from willing or unwilling individuals? Can agency personnel or persons of interest to this agency be conditioned to prevent any unauthorized source or enemy from obtaining information from them by any known means? And can we obtain control of the future activities, physical and mental, of any individual, willing or unwilling, by application of mind control techniques? In subsequent chapters of the book, Bowart describes how the MK ULTRANS actually carried out their assignments at the behest of the Cryptocracy, which will be the subject of the next video in this series.